Hi guys, just before we start the episode today, whatever platform you are listening to this on, whether it be on the podcast, Apple Podcast, YouTube, whatever it is, please support it. Please like, subscribe, whatever you can do. We want to reach as many people as possible. So please do that and we'll get right into the episode. Welcome to another episode of the Chronic Comeback Podcast. Today, I'm really excited to have on the show Giselle Boxer. I'm also really excited that, we just figured out before the episode that we're actually from like a town on like so close to each other, which is kind of insane. I'm going to be seeking out to see whether I can sense your accent. But just to give you a bit of backstory on Giselle. So in January 2019, she was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome. And when her GP told her that she would never recover from the condition, I'm rolling my eyes at that. Giselle went on a personal healing journey to using a holistic approach of diet, supplementation, but most importantly, traditional Chinese medicine. It was through the use of acupuncture, Chinese herbs, and ear seeds that was actually able to get Giselle into a position where she could fully recover and is now thriving and actually helping others on their own healing journey. So I'm super excited to hear about that. I've never heard of ear seeds, so I'm really excited to talk about that. How are you? How are you going?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I'm good.
Cool. Well, look, if we could, go back before 2019 then to understand a little bit about what life was like before then from a health perspective. Were you a healthy person before then? Had you kind of, looking back on it, were there always signs that something wasn't quite right?
Yeah, I'd say I probably was a bit of a sickly child, really. I quite often had cold and flu and viruses, that sort of thing, but nothing too major, had no diagnosis or anything like that. And then at university, I was just a typical student, going out partying all the time, not eating very well, and had quite bad IBS, but didn't look at any way to help it, was just given pills by a doctor, which didn't help. But yeah, it wasn't until 2015 that I had glandular fever, and that, I believe, was the trigger for a couple of different health conditions that I developed. So at first I was diagnosed with something called eustachian tube dysfunction, which is like clicking and popping in your ears. They feel really full. It's as if you're on a plane all the time and you can't actually pop your ears. So I had that condition for a couple of years. And just prior to being diagnosed, actually, I moved over to Australia. And whilst I was there, saw a variety of different doctors and specialists who didn't really have anything to help me with the condition. They said it was a fairly new thing, even though I know that a lot of people were suffering from it because there were Facebook groups and all sorts of support groups for the condition. But anyway, had loads of different tests and everything came back fine, normal. You've got this, it's not a problem, it'll go away. And eventually I had some surgery on it, which didn't help and actually made me feel so much worse. But I was struggling with that condition for a couple of years when I was living in Australia. And I went through, this was about 2017 now, 2018, sorry, went through quite a stressful time in my life where I was really not enjoying my job and wanted to find a new one. So was in a really rigorous interview process for one of the best advertising agencies in the world, and eventually got the job. And the first day that I started this new job, I was really unwell and went home and was just completely knocked out for about 2 to 4 weeks. And I just could not believe that I had finally got the job of my dreams, and then all of a sudden was just so unwell and felt so much anxiety around this and guilt and shame, and was just so embarrassed that I had to be ill on my first day and then never fully regained my health from there. So I would say that was another trigger for the chronic fatigue syndrome. That's when it all began. And from there, I would have like a couple of weeks of feeling okay, not great. And then a couple of weeks of just feeling awful again and couldn't get off the sofa. So it would just go in cycles, really. And I saw a few different doctors in Australia. They did blood tests on me, you know the story. Blood test, everything's normal, you're fine, don't worry, go home and rest, you'll be okay, you need more sleep. And I was in such a miserable place because everybody was telling me, you're fine, don't worry, these, you know, you'll be fine tomorrow, just go home and rest, or you're not sleeping enough. But I knew deep down this was a real health condition and no one was helping me. So I then eventually decided to move back to the UK to try and seek more help, because in Australia I was paying for my healthcare, and I thought, oh, maybe if I move back, maybe the NHS will have some help for me. Wasn't the case, but I did eventually get a diagnosis when I moved home of chronic fatigue syndrome. And whilst it was good for me to get a diagnosis, it's strangely enough, I was praying to be diagnosed with something, because I wanted a solution and I wanted answers. But once I was diagnosed, that actually caused one of my biggest crashes to date, because the doctor said, you've got this condition, we can't really do anything about it, there's no treatment, there's no cure, you'll have it for life, go on your way. And that caused, as I said, my biggest crash to date. And as a 27-year-old woman having to move back to her mom's house from London was a big blow. And I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't walk for more than 5 minutes without feeling really, really weak and faint. I had brain fog, I had headaches, I had stomach issues, the whole list of all of the typical, as you would say, chronic fatigue syndrome symptoms.
I've got a lot of questions. First of all, you've just described the ear thing, symptoms that you had going on. You've just described one of my symptoms that I've never really been able to properly describe, and you described it so well. It's exactly how I feel. So basically, well, I say it's exactly, I don't know how you feel, but it almost feels like I'm on the verge of an earache constantly, and I get pain fairly regularly, but it's not, out of all of my symptoms, it's definitely not one of the worst ones. However, it is very annoying. It feels like I need someone to drain, as gross as it sounds, I need someone to drain my ears. And you saying that, it feels like they're about to pop. Like right now, my right ear is like that. And I just, when I first started getting it, I kept, getting my nose and doing that and like thinking it was going to help, but it really didn't. Just thank you for describing it like that, because actually, like, I haven't actually heard anyone, because I get tinnitus as well. I get ringing in my ears. Did you get ringing in your ears? Yeah. Because I used to get that, and that was kind of like my ear stuff. But then I'd say in the last like 3-4 years, I've started to get that. So I guess it's one of those things. If you describe to people, they probably don't see it as like a big thing, but when you've got it, it's super annoying, right?
Yeah, it's super annoying. I have learned to live with it. It is my only symptom which has stayed. It has gotten better over the years, but It hasn't completely gone away. So I am learning to live with it at the moment, because compared to all the other symptoms I went through, it's basically nothing now.
Yes. So, I mean, I was hoping you were going to say you completely solved it, and now you're going to tell me how to do it. But I agree. If I just had to live with this, I could live with it. That's fine. Okay. And then, I just think from that doctor's perspective, who told you there's nothing we can do, you're going to have this forever, here's the label, now go on your way. Surely it would just be better for him to say, just I don't know if he just lied and say, or no, just told the truth and say, look, I'll be honest, I don't know anything about this. Go and see someone who knows what they're talking about, because I don't. And did you see the connection with that crash, or how soon did you see that connection with that crash with like his words?
Oh, it was pretty much instantly.
But
Pretty much.
sorry, I mean, as in, did you realize that it was because at that time, did you realize it was because of the impact of what he said?
No, not really. It was a few months later when I started looking into the triggers of like chronic fatigue relapses or crashes that I realized that it did have an impact. Because there are those kind of like emotional triggers, right, which can make it worse.
Well, because I talked to you before we started recording around like medical trauma and all of that we've had to go through with stuff we've seen online, articles we've read, but then particularly people of authority telling us that we're used to people in a white coat telling us stuff that's true, right? And so when they tell us something, we believe it, and you must have believed that with all of it. It's almost like your body had probably been holding on with hope and then suddenly just gave up because there was no hope anymore. It's just so sad. So at that point, then you had your biggest crash. Yeah, could you take us through the next part of that story? What happened then?
At that doctor's appointment, they said, we can refer you on to a specialist, but there'll be a waiting list of about 6 months. So in my diary for June that year, June 2019, I had an appointment with the fatigue specialist at the Royal Free Hospital. And initially I was like, oh, I'm just going to wait until then, and then I will be cured, and then they will tell me the solution. But my mom, who's really into natural health and wellness, knows a lot of naturopaths, nutritionists, homeopaths, functional medicine doctors, and she said, absolutely no way are we letting this illness ruin your life. We are getting you sorted. We are putting an action plan in place, and we're going to get you sorted. Do not worry. So from the day I got back to her house, we then started reaching out to different nutritionists and naturopaths. And she was such a massive support for me and took me to all the appointments. And I made really drastic changes to my diet. I was taking loads of different supplements, started different homeopathic remedies, and just went on a real personal healing journey, because I knew that I had to take control of my own health and wellness. No one else was going to do it for me. This was my job now. And I had to make myself better with the help of the people who actually, when I went to see them, they said, oh, yes, we've dealt with other people that have had chronic fatigue syndrome. They've gotten much better, or they've fully recovered. And it was just crazy to see the difference between their opinion and the opinion of the Western medical doctors. And just from hearing what they had to say, it gave me so much hope. And I really, really then started to believe, no, recovery is possible. You've just got to meet the right people and do the right things. So I just started researching and just looking into it so much. I read a few different books which were really useful, and I also set up an Instagram account and started documenting my recovery. And from there, I met loads of people who had chronic fatigue syndrome. And whilst there is a lot of negativity in the chronic illness community, so I say negativity, I mean,
I know what you mean.
A lot of people do get very bogged down with their condition and their symptoms, and it's all they think about. And they think, how long have I had this for? This has completely ruined my life. My life is over. I will never recover. They're very stuck in that negative mindset. There are people who are very positive about it and who have hope and do believe that recovery is possible. And to build that community was really, really helpful for me, because I was able to reach out to people that I just had so much in common with and that I could relate to and talk to on a regular basis. So yeah, that was really, really great. Joining Instagram and meeting all of those people. So within about 6 months, I say I'd probably made about a 60% recovery. And I went to this appointment at the fatigue specialist, and lo and behold, the lady looked at my blood tests that I'd had done a few weeks prior. Oh, nothing's on here. Oh, don't worry, darling, you'll be okay. But I've got nothing to help you here. Oh, but you can try some antidepressants if you want. And I said, absolutely no way. This is not a psychological issue. Yes, I do feel upset. Yes, I do feel angry. Yes, I am anxious because I've been going through these symptoms, and my life has been completely turned upside down because of this condition. But this is a physical condition. This is, I do not need antidepressants. Thank you very much. But bye-bye now. And I was so strong at that appointment. And I remember calling my mom and I said, she said this, this, and this, but we knew she was going to say it anyway. So that doesn't matter. Let's move forward. Let's move on. And it's funny because in June 2019, so 6 months after recovery, 6 months after diagnosis, I'd made a decent recovery, but still wasn't all the way there yet. And I had tickets to Glastonbury Festival, which were booked about a year in advance. And I kept saying to my partner, oh, I don't know if I can come. I don't know if I can come. Because I think when you start making good steps towards recovery, there is still a fear of going back to square one and pushing yourself too far. And I was scared that if I went to this festival, I wouldn't be able to keep up with everybody. I knew that it was such a huge festival. There'd be a lot of walking involved. You'd be on your feet all the time. There'd be late nights. And I said, oh, I don't know if I can come. I don't know if I can come. And he said, you are coming to this festival. This is a once in a lifetime experience. You are coming. And when I got there, it was awkward initially because I had to explain to all of his friends that I have this condition. I might get really tired. I'm not drinking. I hadn't drank for a long, long time, which really helped my recovery, by the way. I might need to take things a bit slower. I might not join you on all the big nights out, but I'm here and it's fine. I feel comfortable with the situation that I'm in. I don't feel sad about it, And I had one of the best weekends of my life, but it's funny because I spent most of the weekend in what they call the healing field, which is a part of the festival that's just healers. So Reiki healers, yoga teachers, there's a lot of vegan food, there's massages, there's spiritual psychic mediums. And I was like, oh my God, I'm in my element. I love this. And it wasn't until I got sick that I found so much joy in all of these new hobbies of mine. And I literally spent the whole weekend in this healing field, whilst everyone else went out and partied till the early hours of the morning and was so hungover the next day. And I was like, oh, I'm just going to the yoga this morning now. I'm going to have a sound bath. See you later. And they all laughed so much at me because they were just like, wow, you're having a completely different experience to us. But I loved it and it was amazing. And I did not relapse. And it was just a great weekend for me. And I truly believe that the reason why I went to Glastonbury that weekend was because one of my boyfriend's friends was there, and about 10 minutes after meeting me, she asked him, does your girlfriend have chronic fatigue syndrome? And he said, yeah. Why do you ask? How do you know? Because it is a fairly invisible illness, right? Unless you're in bed all the time, and then it's not so invisible. But when you're sort of 60% recovered and you've got some symptoms, but you very much keep them inside of you and only you really know about them, it's people can't really tell that you've got chronic fatigue. So he said, yeah, she does. How do you know? And she said, well, my brother had really severe chronic fatigue syndrome and he is now fully recovered. And we started talking, and she told me it was because I mean, it's a very holistic approach, as you would know, but a main part of his recovery was through traditional Chinese medicine and meeting a Chinese doctor in Sheffield who was incredible. And as soon as she said that, my partner's actually from Sheffield, so we used to spend a lot of time up there. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to go and see her the next time we go up to Sheffield. So I went to see her, and it was funny because there was quite a big language barrier there. But for the first time in my life, I had 100% faith in a medical professional. I was completely like, okay, I completely trust you. She has lots of case studies of people with ME that she's treated. And I had no idea why there were needles going in my head and in my stomach, and why she was giving me 60 plus herbal remedies to take each day. But I, for some reason, had complete faith in her and was like, okay, this is gonna completely skyrocket my recovery. And it did. And I will be forever grateful to her, because I believe that the supplementation and the diet only took me so far, and my recovery became a little bit stagnant, and I knew that I still had a bit further to go. And I believe that when I started using traditional Chinese medicine, that, as I said, my recovery just completely skyrocketed.
I definitely want to ask about that, like the specifics of that. Just going back to, that initial appointment you had that you were waiting for. I think what's interesting about your story is, and particularly having done so many of these interviews now, I can see different like sliding door moments of like people's recovery where I'm like, that's a point where this person could have actually been in this situation for years and years. Because I can imagine, and I've spoken to different people where they had an appointment with a specialist, they waited, they didn't do anything else, or they tried other things that weren't, I don't know, beneficial. They got to that appointment and then they were even more let down by that appointment. And it just started a spiral of like negative, I guess, belief around their recovery. And people can lose years and years of their life as a result of someone doing that to them. And I know it's not that person's fault, it's bad training and it's a systemic issue with, the NHS and et cetera. But it's just really interesting that your mindset of, I'm taking control over this, and your mum's help as well of, no, we're going to do this, we're not going to waste time. And I guess building up your mental strength over that 6 months, because it sounds like that's what you were doing as well, building up that belief that you had the confidence in that meeting to say, no, screw you, I'm not believing what you're saying, I'm going to go and do my own thing. Does that resonate?
Yeah, completely, absolutely. And I think a lot of people on Instagram messaged me when I'd fully recovered and said, oh, not a lot of people, a few people. Oh, I don't think you had chronic fatigue. I don't think you had ME, because do you not realize you can't recover from that? There is no cure. There is no treatment. You were probably misdiagnosed, or, oh, you must have had a really mild form of chronic fatigue syndrome. Like, you probably weren't that sick in the first place. And it made me realize that maybe I would say I had a moderate form of chronic fatigue syndrome, but because I really put an action in place straight away from the get-go, from diagnosis, and because I did have incredible support around me and access to the right professionals in the natural medicine space, I was able to make a recovery that is a lot quicker than a lot of people. And as you said, I did have that mental strength as well that really, really helped me along the way.
Yeah, and I think having a plan like you had can't be underestimated. Like, I feel at my best when I feel like I'm I have a plan of what to do and that I'm confident in that plan. And I think, you said something. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I also think some people, me included, probably could see a Chinese, because I've done some Chinese medicine, but probably saw the wrong person or whatever. But if you go into it with like a mindset of like, oh, I don't know, this is really going to work, or that kind of mindset, that has such a huge impact. And you were just like, this is it. I found it. This is going to work. And I just, that in itself, I believe anyway, just opens your body up to healing and just makes everything so much more seamless. I don't know if you agree with that kind of thinking as well.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, definitely.
I want to just ask a little bit about the specifics of this, because that, I know Chinese medicine can mean a lot of things. And the reason why, I think that was like the first alternative thing I tried. And it was actually when things weren't that bad. It was when I was getting all these weird neurological things, and I walked past this weird shop in Balham in London, and it was a Chinese medicine, and I went in there, and within about half an hour this guy was telling me he was going to solve all my problems, and I had needles all in me, and then he told me to take all this stuff. I didn't know what it was, and it didn't really help. But then again, at the same time, I was going out, getting really drunk, working really hard, and not living a lifestyle that was like in alignment with recovery. So I can't say that it doesn't work. When you said she was giving you like herbs and stuff, what were they?
So I don't know the exact names, to be honest, but I know that they were antiviral. So in Chinese medicine, they believe that chronic fatigue syndrome is triggered by a viral infection, of which it usually is. A lot of people that I've spoken to have had Epstein-Barr virus, which is glandular fever. And Chinese medicine look at it, so they use the Chinese herbs as antivirals to try and flush the virus out. And then they also use acupuncture. So they believe that chronic fatigue syndrome is a problem with the body's energy system, so the qi, which is the vital energy in the body. And they use acupuncture to kind of reignite the qi within the body and to get all of the systems working properly again. The meridians and energy. There's so many. I think in a lot of different, like, depending on which area of the world, there's different words for it. It's also really interesting that I think people who've had chronic fatigue, Lyme disease, a lot of different chronic illnesses for a long time, that's why then the physical treatment that you've done and worked so well for you doesn't work as well, because we've had it for so long. So then I think there's a lot of mental stuff that's going on, and like that's why people have to then look at limbic system retraining and all of that stuff. Have you heard of like brain retraining? Was that something that ever came about, or was it something like mindset? Was that ever like a thing that you like focused on? It really wasn't something that I read about when I was recovering, but I've still got my Instagram account now, and it seems to be such a huge thing at the moment with people that have got chronic illness, with nervous system deregulation, that's it, and brain retraining. And to be honest, I'd like to look into it a bit more. Even though I don't have any chronic symptoms, I do feel that people that have had a chronic illness, like their lives are forever changed, right? And their brains are forever changed. And it is tricky, because sometimes when I get a bad cold, I think the first thing that pops into my head is, oh my God, why are you feeling like this? Why have you got a snotty nose? Why have you got a sore throat? Are you going to be in bed for the next week? Are you going to have to stop working for the next 2 weeks? How are you going to deal with childcare? How's your partner going to handle all of this? And it's this crazy thing that starts going on in your head, and it's just pure panic. And I think, I would definitely like to look into it, just to maybe hopefully stop that panic one day and tell my body, it's okay, calm down, it's just a cold.
I mean, I definitely think you should, just because I think there's a reason why people like us have ended up having these issues, and there's a perfect storm of things physical, but then also I don't know, the way in which our brain works, etc., etc. And yeah, I guess if there is still that kind of warning sign in your head, then you're still, and I'm not saying anything will ever happen again, I'm just saying I guess you're more open to it than if you weren't addressing it. But that being said, it sounds like you've got a great mindset of like strength when stuff like that does come up anyway. The fact that you obviously, as I said, the number of interviews I've done where people have got a diagnosis like that and it just spirals over years and years and years. And I think that's when the brain retraining really has a huge impact, because people have just got a lot of trauma to undo. But yeah, no. So in terms of like, how quickly did you get to a point where you were like, okay, I feel like I'm back to normal almost?
So I would say I was diagnosed January 2019, and then probably by about February 2020, I considered myself fully recovered. I was running again, not again, I'd never ran before, but I started exercising again, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to go on a run. And I'd never thought I'd enjoy running, but the pure like euphoria that I was feeling running, and I used to cry every time I went for a run after I'd recovered. I would cry my eyes out of happy tears, because I was just like, I cannot believe I'm actually doing this. This is crazy. And I would go on bike rides for hours and hours and cry whilst I was on bike rides. And it was like, I just had such a sense of like, this is my second chance at life, you know, like I now have all the tools that I need to feel amazing, and I can do all of these things. And I think as someone in their young 20s who could go on runs and go on nights out and be busy all the time and do all these things, you're never grateful for that, right? You never think, oh, this is amazing that my body can do this. But now I have such gratitude towards all of the physical things that I can do. And in April last year, I fell pregnant. So I've got a little baby who's a year old now.
Wow.
And it is crazy the amount of energy that you need to look after a child. It is mad. And the sleep deprivation early on as well is just insane. But I'm here to tell the story. I have not relapsed. Wow. I feel amazing. I've got so much energy, and I'm so happy and so grateful that I have a baby and that I'm recovered, and that also I started my own business a couple of months ago. And all the other moms in my antenatal group, they're like, how the hell have you done this? You started a business whilst you have a 9-month-old child. And I was just like, I'm going to do it, because I used to work in advertising, and I used to work for a big car brand. I used to do the social media advertising for a big car brand, and the love and the passion just was not there. And even though I was in a really senior position, I just didn't enjoy it. I really didn't, especially towards the end of my recovery. I thought, there is more to life. There is more to life than working a job that you don't enjoy. And I knew that I'd developed such a passion for natural health and wellness, and that I just had to find a job in this field. So once I'd fallen pregnant, I thought, oh, I've got my maternity leave. That could be a really good time to think about a business that I want to set up in this space. And I did it. And it's a business which is selling ear seeds, which you asked about earlier. You've never heard of them.
Yeah. Tell me what they are.
So they are used in traditional Chinese medicine. They've been used for thousands of years, but no one really in the Western world has ever heard of them. They are little tiny, I'll see if, I don't know if you'll even be able to see. You probably can't. Wow. They look like tiny piercings. I wonder if you can see this.
Yeah, no, I can. Yeah.
Yeah, so what they are is they are really small balls which are coated in like gold or silver plating, and they've got an adhesive sticker on, and they stick on different parts of the ear that correspond with different parts of the body. So in Chinese medicine, the ear is a microsystem for the whole body. So the bit down here is the head, and then it's like an inverted fetus. And then the bit in the middle is like the liver and the kidney. And the crazy thing about the ear is that there are so many nerve endings in your ear. And if you apply pressure to certain points on the ear, it will then send signals to your brain that certain body parts need support. And it's also really good for stimulating the vagus nerve. I'm sure you've heard of this, and relaxing your nervous system. So there have been loads of studies where people have used them that have really, really helped their anxiety. They're really good for headaches. They're really good for sleep, actually. A lot of my customers have said, I've never had such a good night's sleep as I did after I applied your ear seeds. And they're basically a needle-free form of acupuncture. So they're really good for needle phobes, but also just good for people that want to have a bit of a DIY, like at-home healing experience, rather than having to actually go and see a Chinese doctor, an acupuncturist.
Yeah. Wow. What's the so do you stick them on, and you like, obviously me being a guy, am I going to look a bit strange like walking around with like looks like ear piercings? How are they, or is they not that noticeable, or do you just wear them at night?
No, they're really tiny. They're really small. A lot of our male customers like to use the silver because they're like a little bit less obvious. They're a little bit less blingy, I guess. But they are tiny. You wear them for just 5 days and then you take them out.
Okay, got you. Okay, cool. And are they, so are they, they're not reusable? You wear them 5 days and then, or they are reusable, are they?
No, they're not reusable. Yeah. So you just put them in for 5 days and then you remove them, and then you can then start a treatment on the other ear if you want, because you have to leave the ear that's been treated just for a few days to kind of reset.
And were you using this when you were recovering, or is it something you've come across since?
Yeah, so my Chinese doctor did show me them whilst she was treating me. So a lot of acupuncturists use them as like an in-between your appointment thing. So it kind of just helps to just continue healing you between your acupuncturist appointments. So she showed them to me and I was like, oh, they're quite cool, but they're also like kind of super ugly. Like the ones that she used they just looked like tiny plasters.
Yeah.
So they originally came from the Vicaria seed. So they're like a tiny black seed with a plaster on it. And you put them on your ear, and I was like, oh, they just don't look that nice, and I'm a bit embarrassed to wear them. And then when I started looking into it more, I found the gold and the silver plated ear seeds, which actually look super cute, and they're like a bit of a fashion accessory, but they have healing qualities.
Okay, that's really interesting. Yeah, definitely. You send me over the link, and we'll include it in the show notes. But yeah, it'd be really interesting to check that out. I've not heard of that before, so that's really cool. Going back into your, like, just a couple more questions from me, like looking back on what you've been through now, how your life's different now. How would you say, like, what are the things that are like positive as a result of what you've been through? Like, how is your life better as a result of having to go through what you've been through?
It is infinitely better. I think it's funny because when you're in the deep depths of chronic illness, it's like, or when you initially get diagnosed, it's like, oh my God, like I'm the only 20-year-old that's going through this. This is so horrific. I'm losing all these years where I can't work properly and where my relationships are failing. And there are a lot of like sort of negative consequences from being chronically ill. But when I look back now, I think I truly believe that everything in life happens for a reason. And I am where I am today because I had a chronic illness. Like I became so passionate about natural health and wellness and Chinese medicine because I was chronically ill. And now I'm actually living a life where I feel like I love my job. I absolutely love my job. And I didn't think I would ever get to that point, because I was in a typical 9 to 5 job where I was going into the office every day, and I was like, oh my God, I cannot do this anymore. And now I get up in the morning with such a spring in my step, because I'm doing a job that I love and I'm helping people, and it feels amazing. So I'm actually glad that I had a chronic illness, because it put me on this path to finding my life's purpose and to actually becoming really passionate about something and developing all these new hobbies. I mean, before I had a chronic illness, what were my hobbies? I used to go out and get drunk and eat horrible junk food and just be a slob and not really do much. And I mean, I'm sure everybody does that in their 20s, right? Everybody does that.
I was a big hobby of all of those things.
Yeah.
That resonates with me so much. Like I'm doing what I'm doing now as a result. I know I would still be in London, working in the job I was working in, just going after more, I guess, status and money and everything you're trying to do when you're in your 20s. And I think it's made me learn the lessons you need to learn in your life at a lot earlier age, which is really cool. So finally, thinking about, it sounds like you have a lot of interaction with people, with chronic illness. So I'm sure you're, also having been through what you've been through, you're aware of some of the mindsets that people are probably in listening to this right now. To people who are listening to this right now, who are in their darkest hours, what would be your advice to them in order for them to just keep going, keep hoping, keep believing in their recovery?
I think find a community that's really supportive and that can understand what you're going through, so you're not alone. I think look at recovery stories. There are so many out there. If you're listening to this podcast, obviously you're already aware of all these recovery stories. Listen to them, believe in them. It'll give you so much hope. And I think visualizing your future as well is really important. I used to meditate every day, and I'd visualize myself running on a beach in blazing sunshine with my partner, with a baby as well. At that point, I didn't even think I wanted a baby this soon in my life, but I remember just being so happy in this visualization and running, and my body felt amazing and I didn't feel any pain, and I had so much energy, and I kept on visualizing that over and over again. And I truly believe that has had a massive impact as well. So visualization is really key, and meditation as well.
Running on a beach is one of my actually. It's a good one. Cool. Look, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. You were right. There's a lot of parallels between my story and your story, and I'm sure so many other people listening to this will be nodding along, but really interesting elements to it that I hadn't heard before. So really super useful to people listening. If people want to reach out to you, connect with you, how would they best do that?
So I've got an Instagram account called Heal with Giselle, and there's a lot of content on there about my recovery from chronic fatigue syndrome. And then my business account, AcuSeeds, ACU Seeds. If they want to find out anything about Chinese medicine, acupuncture, or ear seeds, then you can send me a DM on there and I'll be happy to help.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I'm really excited to release this one. So yeah, thank you once again.
Thank you so much.